Welcome, listeners. My name's Diana Bernard and I'm the Manager of Education at Seniors' Rights Service. Today in this video we're talking about residential aged care and advocacy. And with me I have Pat Joyce, who's the Manager of our Advocacy Services at Seniors' Rights. In this video we'll be talking about who Seniors' Rights Service is and what they do, what is advocacy, how do advocates actually help, what's the Aged Care Act of 1997 and how it's relevant, what are people's rights in aged care, how do we make a complaint or get help, and does an advocate come out to see you in person? Pat, can you tell the listeners what Seniors' Rights Service does?
Sure. So the Seniors' Rights Service has been operating for 34 years as a community legal centre and aged care advocacy service. So we're independent and free and confidential. We provide legal advice, advocacy to anyone receiving Commonwealth-funded aged care services, and a lot of education so people know about their rights and how to speak up if they're not happy with their aged care services or any legal issues that they have.
Thank you, Pat. So perhaps now you can talk a little bit more about advocacy and what our advocates do.
Well, an advocate will stand beside the person and help them identify their rights and some options. And maybe there's another side to the story. So that's where we come in handy and communicate to the aged care provider, to the manager, and find out what issues have been raised and what's been done to address them.
And have you got some examples of the sorts of things you've helped with?
Probably the biggest issue that's raised for us is communication. Often the older person won't speak up. They're a little bit timid. They don't want to rock the boat. So we give them that confidence to just know about their rights and be able to speak up with someone next to them and ask, have they put something in writing for the management? Have they raised their issues at residence meetings? Have they used the suggestion box or the concerns and complaints box? So we just help them be engaged in raising the concerns for themselves. And family members, we ask, have you written a letter? Have you got these concerns in writing? Have you had a response? And then we just get a check about what's been done and how these things have been addressed.
And what about things like fees? Do you have lots of questions about fees?
Questions on fees and charges are the biggest issue for our advocates. And issues include not understanding the account, sometimes not receiving a monthly account, which is good business practice, and not having that explained to the older person. And older people need to know where their money goes. They've been looking after their money for all their life, and it's really important that they understand how much they pay, why they're paying that, and if they can't afford to pay the fees for some reason, then what steps management can take to help them. Still get the services that they receive.
That's good to hear that they've got some options there. And what is the Aged Care Act of 1997 and how's that relevant to residential aged care?
That's a good question. So the Aged Care Act talks about the rights of the older people receiving care and young ones. So anyone in aged care, the Charter of Aged Care Rights. It also talks about the standards of care and services that everyone receiving care should be provided with. Talks about the complaints process. So advocacy is the first step of that, helping the residents and their families and carers to identify their rights, what's important to each individual. The new standards point to the individual in their choice and dignity and respect, which is the first basic standard they have. Yes. Also fees. So it talks about the fees and how they're worked out. So it's a very important act, and it's had a lot of recent updates in the last few years.
Well, that's good to hear. So can you talk a little bit more about the individual rights? Are there any in particular that are really important?
Well, the Charter of Rights intersects nicely with the new standards introduced last year. They dovetail quite well. And the first one is the right to quality, high quality and safety. So that's the biggest one for me. Number 3 talks about advocacy and having a voice. 7 and 8 talk about the organisation and its responsibility to maintaining those standards. So they're all important. Number 7 talks about staff resources and training and the skills they need to look after each individual for their physical needs and their support needs and activities. So they're quite comprehensive.
And Pat, who monitors those rights and how do people make a complaint?
So the complaints system is monitored by the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, and they have 2 branches, one for compliance and one for complaints, and they work with the Department of Health. So we are part of that system in empowering the older people to speak up and help them address their concerns and raise any complaints to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. A lot of people are timid to do that. They can make a complaint anonymously, or we can do it on their behalf, and we can definitely help them throughout the process while they're making a formal complaint. We don't just hand them over and refer them and then stop. We can supply information and support all the way through the complaints process.
Okay, that's good to hear. Pat, if someone wants some help, how do they go about contacting Seniors' Rights Advocacy Service?
So they could call us on our number, up on the screen, and we can help them. We can talk on the phone. These days we can do video conferencing and WhatsApp, so we can use lots of devices so they can see us. So we look after the whole of New South Wales, so any older person or anyone receiving Commonwealth-funded aged care services we can advocate for, and we can use an interpreter if needed. So we can access all of these, including Auslan.
And Pat, I think a lot of people listening might want to know, do you come out in person?
Yes, so a lot of the work we do is by phone. We can give a lot of information by the phone. And if people need to see us face-to-face, we can do that. At the moment, not so much. We are doing a lot of Zoom meetings, webinars, FaceTime, WhatsApp. So there are other digital ways which we're all learning at the moment to communicate face-to-face, especially with the older people. They like to see a face, know who they're speaking with, and they feel more supported, especially maybe people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, people from culturally diverse backgrounds, or people who have a hearing deficit, older people who are a bit frail. So we'll endeavour to see people face-to-face if we can.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Pat. And thank you, listeners, as well. So don't hesitate to call if you'd like to speak with one of our advocates on 1800 424 079, or have a look at our website, which is on the screen, and we have on the front page an information toolbox. In that information toolbox, you'll find lots of other information on advocacy and on legal topics that you might be interested in. Thank you again.